Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Kermit Baker, the chief economist with the American Institute of Architecture. Kermit, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Kemp. Thank you very much.
We got a little bit of news about you personally. You have retired from Harvard. After how many years were you at Harvard?
I was with Harvard for 26 years, leading their Remodeling Futures program, Kemp. So it was a good run, but also a good time to kind of pass over the leadership to younger folks.
Okay, so you're dialing back just a little bit less on your plate, but you're still the chief economist with the AIA, so we'll keep this interview focused on that whole architectural activity. First, on the billing index, it looks like it was 57 in June. That's the last one we had. That's a near record high, and it's a long run of positive numbers, right?
Well, let me even add to that, Kemp. We just released our July number this morning, and that number was down a little bit, but it's at 54.6, which is, objectively a very, very strong number. So we have, kind of getting back to your point, 6 straight months now of very healthy activity at architecture firms, and I certainly feel that portends a healthy construction upturn as we get into the latter part of 2021 and certainly through the first half of 2022.
I know you always like to remind me that this is a leading indicator and flooring is the last thing that goes in. So for the people listening in the commercial side of our business, this is talking about next year's business, but tell us what sectors are given the activity.
I think that's the good news, which is we break our billings index down into 3 major construction sectors, depending on the architecture firm's specialty: multifamily, residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional. And all 3 of those sectors are extremely strong. And I think the surprise is that the commercial industrial, which we kind of felt was going to be the weakest performer for the near term, just because there wasn't going to be a lot of demand for offices and retail facilities and hospitality and lodging and things like that. But the commercial industrial sector is showing the strongest numbers at present. So it's kind of a go figure, but it's really across the board. And it's across the board regionally, too, that every single region of the country, we break it down just into the 4 major census regions, but every single area of the country is showing very, very healthy numbers. And even back to billings, we also track nationally new project activity coming into architecture firms. We call that new design contracts, as well as inquiries, which are kind of a softer measure of work down the road. Both of those are extremely positive, too. So it's hard to find a dark cloud in terms of what architecture firms are telling us about the health of their business activity at present.
Let's talk about 3 variables and tell me what your take is on the effect they're going to have. I guess the first one is this Delta variant. Do you think that's going to slow things down a little bit?
I think it already has. Yeah, I think this was quite a setback because most of the country was sort of coming out from under and looking forward to more activity moving forward. And I think now taking a couple steps back, and we'll have to see how much that really does slow down activity. But I think there's no question that it's going to take the wind out of the sails in terms of how comfortable consumers feel and how comfortable some businesses feel about sort of totally reopening.
So you've got that pulling us down on the one side, but then you've got this amount of cash that's out there, investment money. That's what lifting us is on the other side, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of savings on the part of households during the pandemic, kind of money they couldn't spend on, vacations and travel and eating out at fancy restaurants and going to sports facilities and things like that. So we economists like to say a lot of pent-up demand out there, and who knows what they're going to spend it on. But I think whatever they spend it on is going to generate more construction activity. So I think that's certainly a strong tailwind for the outlook.
And as an economist, I think you would agree that while the government is printing more money, which devalues the value of cash, it makes sense to push that into assets, which means hiring an architect and building something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's interest rates are still low, even though, as you say, there may be a bit of an inflation bubble that'll push them up at least temporarily. That when that's the case, you want to put it in physical assets, as you say, in buildings and things like that, and in homes. I think that's why we're seeing the strong increase in house values across the country too. People are just deciding that's a great place to park their money.
Let's talk about the back to work regimen. What's your latest read on offices and the need for offices?
I think this story is still unfolding, Kemp. We see businesses that are being pretty insistent that their employees return to work as soon as possible. We're seeing other businesses that say, I want you to work remotely, kind of forever in some instances. I don't have any need for you to come back in the office. We have others that say, we want you to come in part-time, a couple days a week at least. We have others that say, I'm going to leave it totally up to the employee where their comfort level is, and we'll try to work out a system that kind of meets our needs and meets our employee needs. And I'm not sure we have enough information to know kind of what the proportions are for each of those options now. I think it's very much an unfolding tale. Getting back to our earlier discussion, I think the variants are adding a little bit of a wrinkle to this whole thought process, too.
All right, the last topic, travel momentum. Do you see that tailing off some, or do you think that's still building?
Personal travel, business travel, kind of across the board you're talking about, Ken?
Yeah, this motivates investment in architectural buildings because you've got hotels, you've got airports, and all these things that need more infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think the personal travel will rebound once folks feel comfortable traveling. And I think we've seen movements in that direction, but probably a bit of a step back. Business travel a little more complicated. I think they're, kind of the face-to-face sales meeting, going to conferences, going to conventions. I think we may see less of that in the future. I think folks that kind of saw that they could participate in virtual events over the last year and a half are saying, do I need to spend the money and time to physically be there? Again, I think we'll see a lot of variation, but I think we'll see probably a permanent slowdown or scale back in terms of how much business travel we're likely to see in the future.
All right, let's wrap up with one last question. The last time I spoke to you, you thought 22 is probably going to be the best year the flooring industry had seen in a long time. Still feel that way?
Yeah, I think our ABI numbers, Kemp, are really pointing to a pretty strong upturn across the board in terms of construction activity. And the timing, as you suggest, I think we're going to see the front end of the market see a pretty strong fourth quarter. Certainly, ABI has been up since February of this year, so you do add the 9 to 12 months, and you get into the fourth quarter. As you suggest, flooring, kind of furnishings, other sorts of things, the tail end of the construction process are going to be a little bit later in that cycle. So, I think it'll be into the first quarter, into first half of 2022 that we'll see those markets begin to turn up. But I think it's going to be a strong surge once it hits them.
All right, Kermit, thanks for spending time with our listeners. Again, been talking to Kermit Baker, the chief economist with the American Institute of Architecture, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.